Good evening. Thousands of public sector workers across the Midlands have been on strike today. Around 50,000 people, including teachers, firefighters, carers and council workers, took industrial action over changes to pensions and paying conditions. Around 300 schools were either shut or partially closed because of striking staff. And nearly 3,000 workers took to the streets of Coventry, Stoke, Hereford, Wolverhampton and Birmingham in organised rallies. Sarah Falkland was at the largest demo in Birmingham.
The turnout wasn't as spectacular as the sunshine. Birmingham might well be home to Europe's largest local authority, but fewer than 2,000 people took to the streets.
From dustbin men to dinner ladies, from secondary school teachers to social workers, everybody here today united in the common belief that they are hard-working people under attack.
But under attack from what? Dave Pitt is a firefighter from West Bromwich. On paper, things don't look too bad for him. 4 years ago, as a probationary firefighter, he was earning $20,000. Now he's earning $28,000. But that doesn't tell the whole story, as he's struggling to pay pension contributions of over 14%.
For us, it's one thing or the other. It's having your heating on or paying your pensions.
Dr Shukla Kulkarni is a physics teacher. She earned £40,000 in 2010, but couldn't keep up with what she says were ever-increasing demands and now earns £5,000 less.
Workload is just never ending. I've got a little daughter. I come home, pick her up, bring her home, and all I want to do is get on with my schoolwork because it's never finishing.
Teachers, even primary school ones, were well represented, and for them it's not just about pay, pensions and conditions.
The new geography and history curriculum are very poor, and I don't know who's written them, but I'm kind of struggling to make them exciting for the children.
The government's condemned today's strikes as illegitimate because so few people were balloted. It stands by recent pay freezes, arguing that the country is still clawing its way out of the Great Recession. But unions say pay rises are feasible.
First of all, there's £18 billion in local authority bank accounts. And another thing, the rich are doing very well, thank you. The top 1% in our society, their wealth went up by 18% in the last year. They could give a little bit back.
For many, there's just a 1% pay rise to look forward to this year. Librarian Jeff Millington earned £17,000 4 years ago and only £1,000 more this year. He's worried about the future.
You hope that when you retire, you'll be able to put some money in the bank for your retirement, and we can't.
There could be more strikes in the autumn, unions warn. Sarah Falkland, BBC Midlands Today in Birmingham.
Well, that was the picture in Birmingham, but across the Midlands there were picket lines and protests too. Let's have a look now at how the strike affected the region. And we'll start with BBC Radio Stoke's political reporter, Phil McCann.
Well, Hanley Town Hall here was just one location in Stoke-on-Trent where there was a picket line today. There was another at the tax office opposite and at the City Council's headquarters earlier on today. Around 200 people gathered to hear speeches and to attend a rally. Now, 41 schools have been shut across Staffordshire today, many others partially closed. We also had bins not being collected, council buildings closed. In Newcastle-under-Lyme, a crematorium was also shut. Let's see what the situation's like in Coventry and Warwickshire now. Here's Joan Cummins.
There are picket lines like this across the region. The biggest impact here in Coventry and Warwickshire has been felt in the schools. 30 are closed in Coventry and 25 across Warwickshire. Lady Godiva, a woman herself who wasn't afraid of demonstrating, today overlooked a rally of the council's 12,500 workforce here in the city centre. My colleague Ben Sidwell has been finding out what's been going on in Hereford and Worcestershire.
Well, Unison tell me there are over 3,000 public sector workers on strike here in Herefordshire and Worcestershire, around 2,500 in Worcestershire and about 800 here in Herefordshire. As far as schools go, 9 totally closed in Worcestershire, 20 partially closed. Herefordshire, 5 closed and 2 partial closures. Perhaps more significantly, here in the city of Hereford, the library and the museum and art gallery are also closed. Apparently that's the first time ever that the library has been closed by strike action. Well, that's the situation in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. Let's find out what it's like in Shropshire and Amy Cole.
Workers from the Defence Support Group, which is partner to the MOD, have just this minute walked out of their depot here in Donington to stage a rally. They are joined by union members from across the public sector. Now, in Shropshire, 8 schools have closed, 2 in Telford and Wrekin, although the local authorities say that the services haven't really been affected. But I have to say that this is the busiest picket line in the county today.
Well, what difference has the strike made to people here in the Midlands who weren't able to send their children to school or use council services? Ben Godfrey has been assessing the impact in Wolverhampton.
8:30 at the school gate and an infant school in Wolverhampton described as partially closed. Just a few classes were affected by striking NUT members, but it was enough to anger some parents.
I've got 2 children at home. Obviously, I've got to arrange childcare for them.
It's just a bit of a nightmare, really, because the other child doesn't want to go to school because his brother hasn't got to go.
In the city centre, we found Nicholas Baggett.
I wasn't aware of the strike yesterday. I saw him in Bilston.
Out of work for over 6 months and turned away from perusing the latest job vacancies.
A bit gobsmacked. They've told me to come back tomorrow.
Job Centre Plus told us all of its buildings were open today. Here, though, it appeared to be for those with pre-arranged interviews. There was something of a carnival atmosphere in St Peter's Square as 150 attended a rally over pay and pensions.
It's not fair. You know, the MPs can have 11%, we can have 1%.
There is no doubt that public sector workers are feeling pain in Wolverhampton, yet this is a difficult sell to members of the public who have seen their council tax go up this year and also more than £120 million of cuts from the City Council.
I've got some stickers. Would you like a sticker? Oh, it's gone.
Sean Taylor has been unemployed for over 2 years. He stumbled upon this by chance.
You shouldn't be moaning now when you could be moaning a long time ago. So going on strikes, it's an inconvenience.
But when I told the 35-year-old there were teachers here, he had a change of heart.
My mum's a teacher as well. Yeah. So I know the struggles that she goes through, the pressures, the union pressures from the government.
At least 50 city schools were affected by the strike today. The local authority says there's been minimal disruption to public services. Ben Godfrey, BBC Midlands Today, Wolverhampton.
Well, we've had lots of comments from you about the industrial action on Twitter and on our Facebook page. Just a sample of them. Julie Baldwin says, I'd like to know whether any of the parents plan to fine the schools involved for causing their children to miss a day's schooling. Keith Morgan says most of the people working in the private sector would give their eye teeth to have the terms and conditions that the public sector enjoy. And on the other hand, Helen Pinches says, I'd be unhappy if my conditions of employment were being changed. I'm joined now by James Morris, Conservative MP for Halesowen and Rowley Regis. Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's address the point first of all in Sarah Falkland's report from firefighter Dave Pitt. He says he has to choose between the heating and paying his pension. What would you say to him?
Well, I don't really know about his personal circumstances, but the reality is we are reforming public sector pensions.
14%
but
has to pay
the reality
into
is
his
if you look at
pension.
the firefighters' pension scheme, it would take somebody in the private sector having to make a third of their salary and contributions to get a similar level of pensions. We're having to reform public sector pensions because of our long-term economic plan to get the public finances on a sustainable footing. We've cut the deficit by a third. We've had to cap public sector pay at 1% in order to continue the effort of getting the nation's finances in a decent shape.
So now that those are coming into what you call a decent shape, we're just 10 months away from a general election, of course. So any good news for public sector workers watching tonight ahead of that election?
Well, as I say, we've got the deficit down by a third. We've still got a lot of work to do. Public sector pay is capped at 1%. Even the Labour Party are agreeing that public sector pay needs to be capped at 1%. Now, as the economy recovers, we would be hoping that wages would be able to grow as the economy recovers. But we need to keep fiscal discipline. We need to keep discipline in public sector pay because we've still got a long way to recover from the difficulties that we inherited 4 years ago.
Now, this subject has created created a heated debate, as you would imagine, on social media today. Bryn Edwards said, spare a thought, no pay rises for 4 years. It's not just teachers striking. If you have an issue, how about talking to MPs who've just had an 11% increase? That might just stick in the craw of some of the people watching.
Just to correct that, I mean, MPs' pay was effectively frozen for 2 years. It's subject to the public sector pay freeze. There has been a proposal put forward in the future, but there's been no decisions made about that. The MP's pay has been subject to the 1% public sector pay cap.
You spent time with emergency services, police and mental health workers recently, so you see how difficult that job is. Doesn't that deserve to be rewarded properly?
I think it is rewarded properly, but
not according to the people who've taken industrial action today. They don't do that lightly, do they?
I think it was unnecessary, the strike action today. I think massive disruption to the public, massive disruption to their education and to their services. And the reality is that we've capped public sector pay at 1% because we need to continue the effort to get the deficit down as part of our long-term economic plan to get Britain's finances back on a stable footing in order to secure the future of the country and this region.
James Morris, thank you. You're watching Midlands Today. Good to have you with us this evening. Coming up later in the programme.